So flash forward a few years, you joined the New York Times, and Kennedy became president in 1960. And even though you said the only place you'd never want to go was Moscow, the New York Times said, let's go to Moscow.
Yeah, they.
Well, we went before Moscow. It was just 4 years in London and 4 years in Berlin, then Moscow. 2 children born in London and 1 born in Berlin. And so when we were here on home leave, and Top joined the Times, and I said, look, I'll go any place, but I won't go to Moscow. And so Top comes home and says, well, we're going to Moscow. So, well, the thing is, we were at Turner Catledge's home for dinner one night, to a sort of a farewell dinner.
He was the managing editor of the Times then.
And he says, well, I'd never send anybody to Moscow with children. I looked at him. I said, Mr. Catledge, we have 4 children. And he said, well, I don't want to hear about it.
So you're in Moscow with 4 daughters, and so suddenly John F. Kennedy is engaged in a very dramatic confrontation with the Soviets over the missiles that they wanted to put into Cuba. It seemed like at the time that this was going to bring us to the brink of full-scale nuclear war with the Soviet Union. And so what happened? How did you see that play out?
Well, no, the way it played out is that secretly Bobby Kennedy was negotiating with the Russian embassy on an end to the Cuban missile crisis. And on the night that the crisis ended, Audrey and I had been invited to the Kremlin for a celebration of the anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. And during this time, Moscow was incredibly tense because there was still the fear among the Russian people that at any moment that American missiles will become crashing down on Moscow. So we went to the Kremlin for this celebration, in which there were many diplomats present, and why don't you tell them?
Well, we were very relieved because by that time the missile crisis was over. We knew it was over, so everybody was in a gay, relaxed mood. But as we went into the Georgian Hall in the Kremlin, all the photographers and all the newspapermen had to go through security and leave their cameras. Well, I had a little Leica in my evening bag, so I just walked in. And then when we were having, we had a long table always with a lot of fruit and caviar and vodka, and the Russians were on one side and the American and all the diplomatic corps were on the other side. And I found myself sitting directly across from Khrushchev, who had come up to the other side of the table. And I was reaching for some fruit, and he smiled at me, and I opened my bag, and I put up my Leica.
I was not with him. I said, my God, the KGB was closing in on her from every side.
Yes, they were. They were coming. I could see them, but I was getting my shot. And Khrushchev put up his hand like this and ordered them back. So then I took several pictures of him and all of and Nina, his wife, and Brezhnev was there, and everybody. So we broke the ice.
Right.
And that next day, of course, I wasn't very popular with the American, with the male photographers.
Yeah, well, at that point, as Audrey said, with the ice broke and Khrushchev came out from behind the table, and I came up to him, and he said, we were very close to thermonuclear war, but now the rockets are out of Cuba. And at that moment was actually the moment I knew that the missile crisis was over.
That was 1961 or 2?
62.
Uh-huh.
And the next morning in the New York Times, Audrey's pictures were all over the front page,
5 pictures
over
of
my
Bruce
story,
Khrushchev,
reporting the
Uh-huh.
end of the crisis.
But then Khrushchev asked me for tea the next day. Nina, his wife. So I went to tea with all these Russian women and took pictures of them.
Huh.
So
Wow.
as Top liked to say, the missile crisis for us ended with a tea party.
So soon thereafter, you were back in New York with the New York Times, and so because I know that Kennedy was shot on November 22nd, 1963, and you were in New York, but you were thrust into another critical situation.
That's right. Audrey and I were were back from Moscow, and we were en route back to Asia, where I had been appointed chief correspondent for Southeast Asia, and Punch Sulzberger invited me up to a luncheon he was giving for the police commissioner of New York. And the police commissioner of New York was telling everybody at the lunch how difficult it was to protect the President of the United States if any president, if he made a visit to New York. When Clifton Daniel, who was at the table, the managing editor, was called to the phone, and he came back and he said, "The president has been shot. We better go downstairs." I went down with Cliff, Punch Sulzberger following us, and when I got down to the newsroom floor, Arthur Gelb, the metropolitan editor, came to me in a panic. He said, "We don't have an obit on Kennedy, and he's been shot." We had neglected, because it was a young president, and
Very vibrant, very alive.
There was no need for the usual advance obit. So I went to the front desk of the rewrite desk, and Homer Bigot, who was back from covering the Korean War, sat down beside me, and we began to write the president's obit with the background clips coming into us from the morgue, and our personal experience and so on. And then at that, while we were doing that, Clifton Daniel came up to us as we were writing and said, until at that moment we didn't know if the president was dead. He said, he's dead. And so in the next hours before deadline, Homer Bigot and I filled up a full-page obit on the death of the president, and that was one of the most sad moments of our life.
Well, in American history, one could argue.
Yeah.
People have always asked me about, traveling around the world, having children, writing stories, how do you do it? And I always said to them, the explanation is Audrey Topping, my wife. And just to give you an illustration of what her attitude was about all of this,
That's his
we were
story.
in Berlin in 1966, and we were sleeping, and we'd only been in Berlin for a few weeks when a telephone rang, And I went to the phone, and it was Clifton Daniel, the managing editor, on the phone. He said, "We want you to come home and be foreign editor of the paper." And so I poked my head in the bedroom. I said, "Audrey, they want us to come back to New York. They want me to be foreign editor." And you said at that moment,
you said to me, should I become foreign editor? And I said yes.
in the next few days, we took
Top
off.
said, I have to leave in a week. So you get the kids out of the school and turn in their lederhosen and their bicycles and get everything ready. And I said, no way. I'm going with you this time. You've done it before. I'm on to you.
Well, did the periodic danger, the disruption, did it create tension in your own relationship, or did you?
All the time.
I know that many correspondents who travel around the world with families and spouses suffer family problems, divorces, and children who are ill-adjusted. So congratulations on pulling it off. So
You did a job.
yeah, right. So the other story that I'd like to ask you about is Fidel Castro. Obviously, Fidel Castro was part of this trajectory we're talking about today of the Cold War. He was obviously present during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
I was traveling through South America, visiting various bureaus, and I'd made this request to interview him. And one night, of all things, I was in a bar, and there was a telephone call, and come to the airport tomorrow morning, and there was a plane, a Cuban plane, and I arrived in Havana, and I still wasn't told if I was going to see Castro, but we had drinks with him, and I interviewed him and so on. And of course, the central question I asked him was about relations with the United States and his relations with the Soviet Union, which at that time was giving him an enormous subsidy support. And he said, well, at the end of the revolution, I turned to the United States for recognition and for their support, and they turned their back on me, and the Russians offered me help, and so I accepted their support and their subsidy. But he insisted that while he was taking advice from the Russians, that at no point were they in control of Cuba or determining what his policy would be.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of him? Did he seem to you to
He was.
was he a genuine representative of the Cuban people, or was he a dictator who imposed himself on the people of Cuba?
Yeah, well, he was. And what he was like, he was very personable and very relaxed. And extremely knowledgeable of what was going on in the United States, what was going on in South America. He even told me about the school children in Nicaragua, how they were being educated, and details of that kind. And very relaxed and very attractive, and he had some words of English, but most of the time he had a translator sitting behind him, who was very good, who not only translated what he had to say, but also his gestures and so on. As far as what the people we encountered, the ordinary people, yes, it was a dictatorship and a totalitarian country. But I found the people generally quite supportive. They were getting good medical care. They were been treated in terms of living conditions extremely well.
Do you
And
think
I think that opinion was shared by Bill Kovich of the Times, the New York Times guy who was accompanying me on this trip.
Well, did it fit into the pattern of a Mao Zedong reaching out to the Americans or Ho Chi Minh reaching out to the Americans? In each case, we rebuffed these people who were liberation fighters and whatever style they had. They believed that they were fighting on behalf of their people, and they reached out to us. In each case, we made them an enemy.
Well, of course, we had this, this feeling about communists, that we were about to be overrun by the communists at home and in abroad. And the most important thing was just to stand up and oppose any kind of a regime which they saw as pro-communist.
Here's one sentence. This is in the Vietnamese context, but I think it's one of the central themes of your book and your life story. For 1,000 years, the Vietnamese had successfully resisted the efforts of the Chinese and then the French to break their will and compel them to bow down. There was no reason to believe that the Americans would fare any better. Here's the key sentence: failure to take account of such indigenous factors, which often determine why, when, and how an adversary will stand and fight, had already contributed to disastrous policy misjudgments in China and Korea. It seems that consistently the Americans misjudge a Saddam Hussein, or misjudge Afghanistan, or misjudge the Islamic State. That we have a consistent problem in misjudging the local situation, and we get involved in a conflict that's destined not to go well.
Well, I agree with that. I think that that the whole post-World War II period was replete with misjudgments in foreign policy, as far as China was concerned, as far as Vietnam was concerned, and as far as Asia was concerned. I think some fatal mistakes were made by President Truman, in particular, in terms of support of Chiang Kai-shek, and turning his back on Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, which led to the tragedy of the Vietnam War.
Is the Cold War over, or are we now just in a new stage of conflict? On the one hand, resisting Putin and resisting the new Chinese military posture. At the same time, we're confronting the Islamic terror threat. I mean, are we still at war? How could we achieve a period of stability and peace?
Well, I think it is possible to do that on a bilateral basis. I mean, we were up against a whole bloc, that whole Soviet bloc, during the Cold War, and there was a question of ideology in the conflict. Today, I think we're in a situation, whether we're talking about the Ukraine or relations with China, where we are dealing on a national basis, on a basis where we can negotiate not on ideological questions, but on hard material questions, economic questions, questions of reduction of armaments, climate control, all of these things. And I think with an intelligent policy in Washington and an effective president, that it's certainly possible for us to avoid the kind of Cold War
entanglement.
Yeah.
that
Quagmires.
we had in the past.
Well, do you agree or disagree with the statement that journalists have a special responsibility to report on what they see in the world to help guide American policy?
Absolutely, absolutely. And a prime example of that is, as I mentioned, when I arrived in Saigon in 1950 to cover the war there. There were no American correspondents. American people were not getting the information that they needed about French colonialism, about the fact that the French were being defeated. All of these things. If they had that kind of information at that time, they might have influenced the Truman administration to stay out of the Indochina War.
I mean, I hear this a lot from many correspondents. They say over the years the job of being a foreign correspondent has changed, but we're still doing a good job. The real problem is that the American people are just not listening. The people are not listening to what we're producing. Do you buy that premise that we're doing a good job?
Well, I think that when we have dramatic things like the situation in the Ukraine and with the Chinese taking an aggressive posture in their claims to the South Chinese, I think the word is getting through, and I think the press is very effective. I think the main problem we have now is that we're inundated with information, and the result is that very often the facts don't get through, and I think we're having this problem with our kids playing these digital
Computer
games
right.
and so on. The youngsters not getting the message, but given this inundation of information, it becomes important more than ever to have good correspondents and good editors to try to sort out this information and get the get the word through to the public about in each foreign policy situation what are our true basic interests.
After all that you've seen, the two of you, in these years of conflicts and wars and oppression and tough things you've covered and lived through, do you consider yourself optimist or pessimist?
Well, I'm an optimist.
Mm.
And you're a pessimist.
Well, I am.
That's a good balance, perhaps.
Yeah,
right.
I am sometimes a pessimist. Recently, when I see the gridlock, for example, in Washington and in the Congress, something of a pessimist. But long range, I'm optimistic, and I'm optimistic because I think more and more of the people throughout the world are getting more and more educated through the internet, and I think what has happened with the digital revolution, the improvement in communications and so on, I think good newspaper people, good correspondents, and with support from organizations like the Overseas Press Club, I think people are very likely to take the road to peace and well-being.
We're going to figure it out. Well, that's encouraging indeed.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much for spending the time with me
Well,
today
thank
and
you.
for preserving your thoughts and memories for future generations.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.